Armageddon is a world known for war. Its cratered surface has borne the scars of conflicts its world and people have endured. The First War ravaged the world and its population, but this was long lost to their memories. However, the memory of the Second Great War for Armageddon will forever be seared into many, when the massive Ork force assaulted the world, led by the Green Prophet Ghazghkull Mag Uruk Thraka. At an incredible human cost, the Orks were pushed back, when a commissar by the name of Yarrick held Hive Hades against impossible odds, giving time for Commander Dante of the Blood Angels chapter to lead a counter-offensive. This offensive broke the invading Ork force, and although the Hive fell, Ghazghkull was forced to abandon the world. As the war ended and the process of rebuilding began, a hope may have begun to form within the mind of those that still lived on the world, that this peace may yet last. Decades later, on the feast day of the Emperor's Ascension, warp probes registered a gargantuan disruption in the war, as an immensely sized Ork fleet entered the Armageddon system. A call for aid was sent from the astropaths to all systems and ships close by, begging for any assistance that could be lent. As the system's Imperial naval defences attempted to muster an initial defence to delay the Orks from reaching the world, Armageddon began a frantic attempt to prepare for the assault. In the final few weeks leading up to the Ork forces landing on the world, the last of the Imperial forces were brought to fight. The armies of the Imperial Guard and Planetary Defence Forces met at their mustering points. Ancient Titan legions began to prepare their god machines, whilst the Space Marines, the Emperor's Angels of Death from 25 chapters, answered the world's plea. It is here we join the tale of Hive Helsreach and the epic Black Templar chaplain Merek Grimaldus.
I will die on this world. I cannot tell where this conviction comes from. Whatever birthed it is a mystery to me, and yet the thought clings to me like a virus. It almost feels real enough to spread the corruption to the rest of my body, like a true sickness. It will happen soon. Within the coming nights of blood and fire, I will draw my last breath. And when my brothers return to the stars, my ashes will be scattered over this priceless earth of this accursed world. Armageddon. Even the name twists my blood until burning oil beats through my veins. I feel anger now, hot and heavy. This sensation, and its physical reaches my fingertips. My hands curl to fists.
Grimaldus is a chaplain of the Black Templars. The Templars are known for their righteous zeal and hatred of the xenos. These Astartes prefer close quarters combat, and are often seen to have chainswords and other melee weapons chained to their gauntlets and waists. These are Space Marines that worship the God Emperor, and with bolter and sword bring his light and destroy those who oppose it. The chaplain is a specialist officer within the Space Marine chapters, and serve as their spiritual leaders. These warrior priests instill the values and belief of the chapter, and are often seen where the fighting is most fierce. They fight with a zeal for the destruction of his enemies, and find this a most glorious task. Grimaldus kneels within the Temple of Dawn, a museum within the Space Marine warship the Eternal Crusader. He kneels before Helsreach, High Marshal of the Black Templars, the leader of their chapter. Mordred, the mentor of Grimaldus, has fallen. The chapter, for the first time in a century and a half, lacks spiritual leadership. He was chosen to fill his mentor's position. As a veteran of the Crusades in his own right, Grimaldus has stood as the chapter's youngest sword brother. As a chaplain, he was dauntless. His ferocity and faith was unequalled amongst his peers. It was the belief of Helsreach and his former mentor that now he should bear this honour. After the ceremony ended and his brothers left the Temple of Dawn, Grimaldus stood before a short column. Atop lay an ornate artifact beneath a pulsing stasis shield. Its ornate dark metal haft appeared unblemished despite its countless battles. The head was a hammer of holy gold, fashioned into a Templar cross encased with eagle wings. On the column a silver plaque had been fixed, reading Mordred. We are judged in life for the evil we destroy. As Grimaldus deactivates the shield and first holds the weapon, Artarian, a member of the squad, greets him. Artarian informs the Reclusiarch their destination is close, and he has begun to make the squad ready. As the squad makes ready for war and begins to don the ancient Ceramite warplate, Grimaldus introduces us to the Knights of Squad Grimaldus. Kadar is the oldest of the squad and a defiant warrior. Due to the extent of the injuries he has sustained during his crusades, the warrior has been left half bionic due to many untreatable wounds. Released from the Sword Brethren due to his advancing age and slowing reflexes, he continues with an ironclad resolve. Priamus is the contrast to Kadar, acutely aware of his skills in an almost cocky manner. A blade master, the young warrior calls himself. However, he is not mistaken. Artarian is Grimaldus' shadow, just as Grimaldus is his. Rare are the warriors that would forego the pursuit of personal glory for the sake of another, and yet Artarian bears his banner. His face is a foul mess, for he took a sniper wound destined for the Reclusiarch. The newest amongst the squad was Nerovar, their apothecary. His quiet endurance for his task had impressed the squad during their search to replace their fallen brother. The Narthisium, the tool of their trade, was both the giver of a merciful death and preserver of the precious gene seed. The last amongst them was Bastion, always the best of them and simultaneously the least, forever a sergeant and never fated to rise above this. In an Astartes gunship, the Templars drop from the heavens and land just outside of the walls of Hive Hades. As the Imperial Guard escort which has come to greet the Templars approach, they only make out 3 warriors. These 3 stand in front of 18 gunships, with ramps and bulkheads still sealed. The guardsmen approach to greet the 3 giant figures, when in unison the warriors drive their weapons into the earth, each in turn declaring their name and title. The first was Helsreach, High Marshal of the Black Templars. The second, wearing a plain black armour but wielding a massive ornate sword, was Bayard, the Emperor's champion. Finally was Reclusiarch Grimaldus. Helsreach announced that he, alongside of 900 of his brothers, had come to the defence of the world. 900 Astartes. Entire systems had been conquered with a quarter of the number. And whilst the Imperial Guard General meeting the Templars had greeted dozens of other Astartes commanders, none had brought such a sizable force to Armageddon. In the War Council, all men, both Guard and Astartes, listened to one sole figure. Not a hero, the hero. Sebastian Yarrick, the hero of Hades Hive, speaks, and when he speaks of Armageddon and her defense, all listen. It is within this discussion that Yarrick states that Hades Hive will perish within the first week of the war. Whilst some question this statement, it was Grimaldus that came to the defence of the old man's reasoning, speaking that the orcs had not come for vengeance or to bleed them for previous defeats, that they had come for the simple pleasure of violence. Hive Hades was a ruin, with little left worth fighting over. The Orc prophet would surely know this, and would expect only a token resistance to be fielded. In fact, it was far more likely that the Orcs would simply bombard the Hive from orbit, rather than try and take it. Despite resistance, it was clear that Hades would not survive the first week, and its abandonment would do a greater deal more good, with the forces that could be utilised spread amongst the remaining hives. Matters of the conflict in the Void were next amongst the discussion. The figures amongst both sides were truly terrifying. Over 50,000 Astartes and 30 times the number of Imperial Guard were within the subsector. Imperial analysts still predicted, however, that this would not be enough to prevent the Xenos from making planetfall. Their best predictions would hold the enemy and deny their landing for 9 days, and at worst a mere 4. The honour of the command of Void Warfare would fall to High Marshal Helsreach, for his clear superiority and expertise in the area. It was then that the hope began to rally within Grimaldus. Perhaps he would not die on this world. If they were to stay within the stars, he wouldn't die in futility. As the humans continued presenting how the Black Templars would be best fitted for the task, Helsreach's gaze turned to Grimaldus. His dark brown eyes pierced the grinning skull mask.
I have already spoken with the other marshals, my brother. We must leave a contingent on the surface. I will lead the orbital crusade. Amalric and Ricard will lead the forces in the Ash Waste. All which remains is a single crusade to defend one hive city yet unguarded by Astartes.
Helsreach's voice booms, silencing any discussion in the room. As all eyes become fixed on the High Marshal and Reclusiarch, Grimaldus shook his head sourly.
That is not our duty, my liege. Both Alberic and Ricard are hosted on us. Each have led greater crusades alone. Neither will relish an exile to a filthy Minotaur hive. Whilst your brothers wage a glorious war in the heavens, you would shame them, Lord,
Said Grimaldus, his vox adding the signature distortion to his voice.
And yet, a commander must remain.
Said Helsreach, his features immovable.
don't.
Ice water ran through Grimaldus's veins. His heart rate began to elevate. If an Astartes could feel trepidation or anxiety, Grimaldus was currently experiencing it. He pleaded.
It is already done.
No.
He meant the word with every fibre of his being. His heart rate continued to elevate, his voice gradually becoming louder.
No!
Helsreach remained unmoved. His hard features gave no indication of doubt in his judgment.
This is not the time. The decision is made, Grimaldus. I know you as I knew Mordred, and you will not refuse this honor.
That last word, honor, it bit deep. Grimaldus stepped closer to Helsreach and tore his helmet away. The grinning skull mask gave way to the face of fury that lay beneath.
I would burst the great enemy's black heart in my hands and cast his blasphemous flagship to the surface of this world, wreathed in his holy fire. Do not leave me here, Helsreach. Do not deny me this glory.
Grimaldus snarled. The hatred for the Xenos existed within his very DNA. To hate the foe came as natural as breath. It wasn't just a desire to act, he had a deeply rooted need to purge the unclean.
You will not refuse this honor.
Helsreach said, finality in his tone. Grimaldus locked his helmet back into position, the hiss of the pressure lock breaking the silence of the room. He turned and began to stalk from it.
Brother, wait.
Helsreach's tone confirmed that this was a request rather than an order, and for that it could be disobeyed. Grimaldus left the chamber, with not a further word being said. Their destination awaited them, the sprawling hive known as Helsreach. Helsreach was primarily devoted to the production and exportation of fuel. The hive was located on the southern coast, with vast docks to facilitate the movement of its key export. In the docks there is an underwater pipe linking the hive to the Deadlands thousands of kilometers to the south. The Temple of the Emperor Ascendant stands out amongst the factories that are littered amongst the hive, a bastion dedicated to the glory of the God Emperor. One massive feature runs throughout the core of the city, a vast stretch of rockcrete roadway, a highway wide enough to allow for an Imperial Guard troop carrier to land on. This highway ran throughout the city, like a spine splitting it in two, with thousands of offshoots allowing for vehicles to run on and off with ease. Hell's Highway was the name the people of the Hive had given it. 4 Thunderhawks raced across the bleak skies of the Hive. In the far distant east, outside of the city, Titans could be made out. These massive god engines are currently dormant, undergoing the rites to awaken such a war engine. Within the cockpit of the lead aircraft, 6 knights stood, studying this sprawling expanse.
Reclusiarch.
Said Nerovar. The new title that Grimaldus bore came out clumsily.
How can we defend?
He swept his arm in a slow motion across the exposed flank of the vehicle. His hand drew attention to the vast scale of the hive, the incredible number of streets, roads, and factories.
How can we defend all of this? An endless road that leads into 1,000 others.
Grimaldus turned to face his brothers, the glistening red lens of his grinning skull mask twinkling as the internal lights of the Thunderhawk flashed on and off. He began to speak, but was cut off.
With blade and bolter, my brother.
Said Bastalan.
With faith and fire.
Grimaldus recognized his own words leaving the sergeant's mouth, and he turned back to face the windshield of the Thunderhawk. He looked down on the insane stretch of road that left the hive entirely accessible in 1,000 different ways. They were vulnerable. The 4 Thunderhawk gunships touched down on an ill-prepared landing pad clearly unsuited for the purpose. The engine wash of the gunship sending servitors careening across the deck, and with a thunderous clang the ramps of the crafts opened, and in orderly ranks 100 Black Templars began to arrange themselves in front of their landing vessels. In the distance, monitoring and failing miserably not to be impressed by the show, was Colonel Soren, of the 101st Armageddon Steel Legion. After a brief check of his uniform, he marched towards the Towering Angels. As he approaches, 6 of the 100 step forward, with all but one bearing massive swords and bolters. This single Astartes carried a towering banner, a deep red and black, depicting the skull-helmed knight awash in a golden purity, with a blazing aquila overhead. The cloth of the banner moved lazily within the wind. Grimaldus introduces himself to the human, and just as the man is about to respond, the roar of 100 throats cries,
Imperator Volt!
The colonel jumped, then composed himself quickly in the face of the towering angel. Despite the power of the cry, none of the warriors had moved. Its meaning in High Gothic, the Emperor wills it. The small man introduced himself as the colonel of the Steel Legion and the overall commander of the Imperial Guard defending the Hive, and with him a host of his command staff. The staff has fulfilled a range of roles. Syria Tyro acted as a liaison between the off-world forces. The next notable member within the group was Commander Corten Basrath of the Imperial 5082 Naval Wing. This unit had previously fought alongside the Templars, and 16 of the Lightnings bore the heraldic cross of the Black Templar. The commander had fought alongside Marshal Tarrison during the Dathax Crusade. An immediate respect grew for the man, with Grimaldus informing him that he was honoured. Pride surged within the wing commander as he snaps a crisp salute. The Moderatii Primus, Valian Casimir of the Legio Invigilata stood next, a messenger from the blessed engine the Storm Herald. The man spoke on behalf of the Princeps Zaramanicon, the final member of the group, a sweaty, portly gentleman. This was the portmaster of Helsreach Dock, Thomas Magnus. With the introductions finished, Grimaldus was led by the colonel to further discuss the defence of the Hive. Within the command room, the weight of the defence begins to dawn on Grimaldus. He is in command of a city. The preparations for this attack have been underway for months. However, the great enemy was to arrive within days. Grimaldus has spread his 100 knights across the city, seeking for them to serve as bastions of faith, to shine where the fighting was thickest. However, this is not how a crusade should be fought. It should be with unity. Information appears in torrents, his superhuman mind enduring this endless stream of data. The information was vital to the defense of the city. It bore the location of the food stores, how long they would last under the best case circumstances and under worst case, rationing projections, unsustainable rationing projections, and lists of estimated sacrificed lives for such a venture. medical facilities, medical stores, where weapons were stored, ammunition, the militia numbers and their training schedules, and then there was the guard information, and that alone took 2 days to process. Grimaldus sits and endures this flood for 9 days, before finally rising on the 10th, startling those around him that had grown accustomed to the motionless Templar. Something has unsettled him, and slowly he stands as a siren begins to wail. From the Vox towers positioned across the city, a robotic voice announces,
Attention, people of Helsreach. Across the planet, the first sirens are sounding. Do not be alarmed. Repeat, do not be alarmed. The enemy has translated in system. The might of the Armageddon battle fleet and the greatest Astartes fleet in Imperium history stands between our world and the foe. Do not be alarmed. Maintain your daily rites of faith. Trust in the God Emperor of mankind. That is all.
Grimaldus continues to finish preparations for the defense of the Hive. The Titan Legion will need a further 3 days to finish the fitting and armament process. However, they are yet to decide whether or not they will come to the aid of the Hive, or whether they will join the rest of their forces in the Hemlock region. The Reclusiarch meets the Moderate Eye Primus within an overlooked tower within the Hive, to proposition him for the Legio to walk in aid of the Hive. However, the Legio's minds are yet uncertain, and he is unable to guarantee such a thing. Grimaldus then asks to speak with the Princeps Majoris in person. However, this would be a gross violation of the Legio's regulations, and is denied. Grimaldus takes in the vast expansive view from the tower for a final time, before informing the Moderate Eye that his objection was noted and duly ignored. Before a response could be heard, Grimaldus had already requested a land raider to take him to the wastelands. After travelling across the expanse for 4 hours, they arrived at the Legio landing site. Crews of servitors and robed tech priests moved around the massive Titan. They stood in front of the Titan known as the Storm Herald. This was a walking fortress, with weapons capable of levelling entire cities. The legs of such an engine were a barracks, with turrets and arched windows for the troops garrisoned within to fire at the foe, even as the Titan crushed them underfoot. Spires of the sacred armoured cathedral, dedicated to the Emperor and his aspect of the machine god, emerged from the back of the war engine. These ornate peaks are almost out of sight from ground level. The entrance to the Titan lays at its feet, which are tiered stairs leading to the armoured chambers within its shin. The way is blocked by the foot soldiers of the Mechanicum known as the Scutari, and despite Grimaldus's best attempts to pass these peacefully, his patience begins to run thin, and just as he powers his Crozius up, access is finally granted to the Titan. The command deck of the Titan is a circular bay, with various thrones and displays being worked on by the tech adepts. 2 vast windows offer a viewpoint across the landscape. Grimaldus notices now that he is looking through the eyes of a god engine. Central to the deck was a glass tank supported by whirling machinery. Within the milky fluids floats a naked woman, ravaged by the years and the augmetics required to sustain her life within the casing. Her bug-eyed augmetics stare out through the tank at Grimaldus.
You are keen to speak with me. Waste no time with pleasantries. Storm Herald waits, and soon I must walk. Speak.
Croaked the Vox speakers, giving a robotic form to her words.
am told by one of this Titan's pilots that Invigilator may not walk in our defense.
Said Grimaldus, the grinning skull mask glaring through the tank.
This is so. I command a third of this Legio. The rest walk with your brothers, the Salamanders in the Hemlock region. Do you petition me for the mighty Invigilator?
The speakers croaked again.
I do not beg, Princeps. I came here to see you with my own eyes and ask you, face to face, to fight and die with us.
Replied Grimaldus.
You have not completed your intended duty, Astartes. We are not face to face.
The crones Vox called back. With that, Grimaldus reached to his collar and disengages the seals, removing his helm. The smell of the sacred oils and the tang of the tank were far stronger now.
You have kind eyes.
The crone's eyes have long been replaced, and unable to return the compliment, Grimaldus stays silent.
What is your name?
The vox crackles again.
Grimaldus of the Black Templars.
The lone knight replies. The activity on the bridge had all stopped now. Every member of the crew was fixated on the interaction between their liege and the one that had defied this holy sanctum.
Now we are face to face, Grimaldus of the Black Templars. You have been bold enough to come here and honor me with your face. I am no fool. I know how rare it is for a chaplain to reveal his human features to one not of his brotherhood. Ask what you came to ask, and I will answer.
The speakers crackled. This was the moment. Grimaldus reached forward, pressing his palm against the pod's surface, feeling the micro vibrations of the great engine twinning with his own ancient armor.
Princeps Zara, Helsreach calls for you. Will you walk?
A smile, a mouth filled with decaying teeth from the blind crone floating within her milky water. A moment's pause, she reaches her palm to press against his.
Invigilata will walk.
Several hours later, from the walls of the hive, the guardsmen heard the mechanical howls carried on the wind, before a booming roar echoes across the wasteland, the sound travelling across the streets, breaking weak panes of glass as it passes. The noise eventually reaches the command bunker, where Colonel Saren shivers, before finally stating with certainty that Storm Herald has awoken. 3 days was promised to have the engines within the city, and on the 3rd day the ground shook as the god engines approached. The great northern gate of the city swung open to greet the Titans. From the command room, Grimaldus alongside the other command staff watched, and opens a link to the princess.
Good morning, Princeps,
He calls softly into the vox.
and welcome to Helsreach.
The pondering Titan in the distance moves graciously through the city blocks.
Hail, chaplain. I was born in a hive like this, you know.
She returned. Her voice seemed charged with barely contained power.
Well, Zara, it is fitting that you shall be dying here.
He replied. The noise struggled to be carried through the vox.
Do you say so, Sir Knight? Seen me today?
The distant form of the Titan continued to grow fractionally closer, its ponderous speed seemingly having increased.
It is impossible not to see you, Princeps.
Grimaldus gently says.
It's impossible to kill me as well. Remember that, Grimaldus.
Even amongst the highest ranks of the Mechanicum, the use of his name so informally was unusual. In fact, he couldn't recall the last time a human had used his name at all. For the first time in days since he descended to this planet, the knight smiled. The city was finally sealed, and as the final light of the day faded and night fell, the stars began to fall. A single star tore across the sky towards the earth. In its former years it was known as the Purest Intent, an Astartes strike cruiser of the Shadow Wolves chapter. The Black Templars had been with them at the end, when the final Shadow Wolf was slain by the disgusting Tyranids. The vessel had been lost with all hands, presumed captured by xenos raiders. As the star tore through the sky above the hive, warning sirens once again howled. A squadron of lightnings scrambled, but voxed their inability to engage the vessel. It was burning up already, and its structural integrity couldn't last much longer. It was exactly 18 seconds after the star cleared the hive's walls that it carved a deep trench into Armageddon's already poxed surface. Within the command room, a discussion takes place. The latest report from the battle fleet was that they were holding. However, 37 enemy ships had broken the Imperial blockade. Only 6 of these had not been annihilated by the orbital defense array. An underestimation had been made on the number of orcs, which were believed to be assaulting the world. The original 4 to 9 day estimate for holding them within orbit was scrapped completely. The casualties were already close to 1 million. It could only be a day or two at best. Grimaldus could smell it. The stench of fear. His helmet was unable to filter that smell. He quickly returned the human command staff to their purpose. They required direction, and a decision on the downed strike cruiser would achieve such a goal. A range of options were provided to hold within the walls, for not many could have survived such a crash. Another suggested sending a Titan, for such an overwhelming victory would surely inspire the defenders of the Hive, for the morale amongst the Steel Legion was mediocre at best. Grimaldus remained silent, and eventually it was this silence that slowly halted the discussion. Rising to his feet, his armor snarling with the motion,
It is decided.
said Grimaldus.
You are correct. Helsreach needs an overwhelming victory. Its morale benefits will be significant. It is time my knights took to the field. While humans may need first blood, we hunger for it. Allow us to give you this victory.
When questioned with how many of the Astartes he would take, he responded with 3 words.
All of them.
Within the wreckage of the ship known as the Purest Intent, the Templars hunted, moving room by room in the name of the purification of their brother's former vessel. Grimaldus and his squad are pursuing Orc survivors, and it is the swordsman Primus that's moved ahead of his brothers. His squadmates often chastise him for this pursuit of glory. They call him vainglorious. However, Primus doesn't believe there is anything vain in glory. Whilst his squadmates believe he is rash in his pursuit, he simply trusts that his skills will overcome any challenge, just as the great Sigismund, the first High Marshal, had. In the distance, Primus hears grunts, and through the smoky haze ahead, he makes out 3 brutish orc figures. The creatures had attempted to hide themselves within the broken gantries and mangled assortments of wreckage. Their stench, however, gave them away. Bile rose in the Astartes' throat. Their existence caused great offence. Primus began to approach when the greenskins melted into the darkness, with one of them heaving a massive heap of scrap loosely resembling a weapon. The weapon bucked in the xenos' hands as a massive claw shot forward from the device, electric arcing through the cabling that connected the claw to the weapon body. The claw gripped Primus's chest, and there was a moment of pain as his suit was overloaded. The connection interfaces between him and his suit burned, and then his world went black. They had deactivated his power armor, its weight suddenly noticeable on his shoulders. Primus tore his helmet off, his eyes quickly adjusting to the gloom of the ship. The green skin began wrenching at the device, trying to give the Space Marine another powerful current. Before Primus could raise his sword to sever the connection, the charge kicked again. The current passed through his nervous system. His muscles tightened immediately, cramping with the strain. His jaw locked, his attempt to cry out dying in his throat. As the squad continues to hunt through the remains of the ship, it is Nerovar, the squad's apothecary, that hesitates momentarily. An unusual thing for an Astartes to do. So unusual, in fact, that Kador questions what is wrong with the apothecary.
Nero!
A small pause before again the vox clicks.
Nero! Do you see something?
Kador says. As Nerovar interpreted the data streams on his eye lens, he broke the silence. It was Primus. His vitals had been lost, and Nerovar is not known to make mistakes. The apothecary called for Grimaldus over the vox and informed him of the immediate severance of Primus's vitals. Unable to process the information at first, Grimaldus demands confirmation, but Nerovar had already confirmed this before contacting him. In a cold tone, Grimaldus orders his brothers to continue with their search and destroy mission, and before objections could be made, he stated that he would find the swordsman. The greenskins were crouched over his prone body, and although they had brought him down, they had little idea what to do with their prize. One of the beasts stood, passing the knight's helm over in his hands, and if the beast meant to make a trophy of it, Grimaldus would punish him dearly. As he enters the broken corridor, Grimaldus lets the haft of his power mace slide. The mace head drags on the floor. Sparks squeal from where it is dragged. Subtlety is no longer required.
Greetings.
He breathes. His eyes blaze in the darkness. Their hideous heads turn, their bloated eyes and slacked jaws fixate on their new opponent. One of them hefts an unwieldy scrap launcher. The bearer racks and fires this weapon. In a split second, his mace is up and smashes the claw that is shot towards him downwards.
You dare exist in humanity's domain? You dare spread your cancerous touch to our worlds?
Grimaldus laughs as their footsteps ring down the hall to meet him. He laughs. His maul ignites, and with a two-handed grip smashes the first in the gut. The power field of the weapon sends the xenos hurtling down the corridor. The orc's head smashes off an exposed pipe. His skull splits, blood coating the walls. The second orc hesitates after watching such a brutal display. It begins to turn and run from Grimaldus. However, he is far faster, and within moments he's grabbed the orc's armoured collar and slams him into a wall. His gauntleted hands crush the beast's throat. The xenos attempts to cry curses in Gothic. Rage burns within him. The grip on the beast's throat tightens. Bones begin to pop and snap under the immense pressure of his grip.
You dare defile the language of the pure race?
Grimaldus wrenches the orc forward before snapping his hand back into the wall. The alien's head clatters into the wall, earning the sick crunch of bone. As the orc head begins to break, but still the beast continues to draw breath.
You dare desecrate our tongue?
The xenos head is again smashed into the wall, a wet crunch this time, and the struggle from the orc is gone. Grimaldus drops the beast with a muffled thud. His fury fades and sense begins to return. He must find Primus. Ahead lay the body of Primus, blood trickling slowly from his ears and open mouth. He kneels beside his brother and vox the location to Nerovar, confirming that the knight is still alive. A forced discharge weapon had knocked his armor out, and both of Primus's hearts were beating, although that second portion of the statement was of some concern, for the second heart of an Astartes only beats once significant trauma has been done.
3 minutes, Reclusiarch, and we will be with you.
The inbuilt microphones in Kador's helmet struggle to dampen the booming roar of bolter fire.
Resistance, Kador?
Asks Grimaldus.
Nothing of consequence.
Replied Kador. Closer to 2 minutes later, Nerovar and Kador appear in a sprint. The stench of combat stims and tang of bolter discharge lurked with them. Nerovar kneels by Primus and sets to work scanning him with his Narthecium. A few footsteps away, Kador stood, muttering into the vox and reloading his pistol. Moments later, Primus's eyes shoot open, and he swiftly takes 2 actions. The first was reaching for the sword chained to his waist. The second was to cry.
Those whoresons! They shot me!
As the knight looked up at Nerovar, the apothecary offered his hand.
Get away from me! I said get away!
Knocking the hand aside. As they emerge from the wreckage of the fallen star, all 100 knights assemble, their transports awaiting them to take them back to the Hive. Kill totals scroll across Grimaldus's eye lens. The vox silence is finally broken for Grimaldus as Artarian sends a message in a channel with only them in.
Brother, you've changed since inheriting Lord's mantle.
He says as they climb aboard the awaiting Land Raider.
You are speaking foolishness.
Grimaldus snaps.
No, brother. Yeah, me. We have spoke, Cato, Nero, Astelin, Primus and I. We've listened to talk amongst the others. We must all deal with these changes and face this duty. The darkness, brother, is spreading to the entire crusade. 100 knights fearing that the fire in your heart is reduced to smouldering embers.
There is a sadness in Artarian's voice. In the decades they had crusaded, the Astartes had never known a melancholy taken hold within his brother chaplain, and for a brief moment, as the engine begins to rev, the blood within Grimaldus's veins turn cold.
Reclusiarch.
A small voice rattles over the Vox network, and deep within his thoughts, Grimaldus doesn't immediately recognize it, but he replies all the same.
Grimaldus, speak.
The voice is small, but filled with awe. There's almost an eagerness to it.
Reclusiarch. Throne of the God Emperor. It's truly beginning.
Colonel Sarin said through the Vox.
The battle fleet is in full retreat. The Astartes fleet is withdrawing with them. They are breaking through the orbital defense array already. Grimaldus, it's beginning.
We are returning to the city at once. Has there been any communication from the Eternal Crusader?
Grimaldus replies, and there are several moments of Vox feedback before a voice that Grimaldus knows well appears. High Marshal Helbert, a warrior he had crusaded with for decades.
Helsreach, this is Crusader. We are breaking from the planet. The orbital war is lost. Repeat, the orbital war is lost. Grimaldus.
There was a pause.
Grimaldus, once you hear these words, stand ready. You are Mordred's heir, and my trust is with you. Hell comes, brother. The great enemy's fleet is without number. Faith and fury will see your duty done.
Rage pours from Grimaldus. Silent curses that he could never give voice to, for damning him to this exile, for damning him to die in futility. The recording goes on for a short period longer before the High Marshal's voice returns.
Grimaldus.
The word has a tone of finality to it. It cuts to the Reclusiarch deeper than any blade could.
Die well.